The bottle of Dom Perignon was colder than the December air outside, and the condensation had already soaked into the sleeve of my jacket as I climbed the 3 flights to our apartment. Normally, I would have been gasping for breath by the second landing, but tonight my heart was racing for an entirely different reason. After 3 years of living off instant ramen coding, until my eyes burned and convincing myself that the sacrifices were worth it, the impossible had finally happened. My app had sold. Not for a modest sum, not for a gamble, $5.2 million, signed and sealed. The money wouldn't hit for 2 weeks, but the ink was dry. I wasn't the broke, exhausted developer anymore. I was finally a woman who had built something real. More importantly, I was finally the version of myself my boyfriend Daryl always insisted he was waiting for. I unlocked the apartment door with a grin already forming, ready for the hug, the laughter, the pride I'd always imagined. Daryl had spent years reminding me how difficult my ambition made his life, how embarrassing it was explaining my pretend job to his family, how much pressure he felt carrying us financially while I chased a dream. Tonight would finally be different. Tonight he'd understand why I needed him to hold on. "Daryl, you home?" I called out as I stepped inside. He was in the kitchen, scrubbing a pan like it had personally offended him. The sound scraped sharply across the stainless steel sink. He didn't look at me. "You forgot the trash, Rebecca," he said, his voice flat and tired. Not angry, just disappointed in that dull, familiar way that made me feel like a burden. "It's garbage day tomorrow. Now the hallway is going to reek because you were too busy zoning out over your little project again." I swallowed and shifted the champagne bottle behind my back. "I'm sorry, You're always sorry," he snapped, spinning around. "You know who called today, Jenna. She asked if you'd found a real job yet. Do you have any idea how humiliating it is to tell people you're still glued to a computer screen for an app that isn't going anywhere? Ambition without results isn't ambition, Rebecca. It's delusion. And I'm tired of waiting for you to grow up." Jenna, his ex-girlfriend, the one he kept in contact with because she just gets career things better than you do. His words hit hard, but not unexpectedly. This had been our dynamic for the last 18 months. I was the idealist, the dead weight, the emotional chore he had to manage. He was the responsible one, the martyr who made sure rent got paid. "Daryl," I said quietly, "I didn't take the trash out because I was at the lawyer's office today." He rolled his eyes. "Oh, great. Did someone sue you? Did you infringe on a copyright? Do we need to borrow money from my parents again? Because if your app—" "We sold," I said, cutting him off. The scrubbing stopped. He froze completely, his back stiffening as if a wire had been pulled tight. "What?" "The app. We sold it this morning. The intellectual property, the user base, everything." I stepped farther inside and set the champagne bottle on the kitchen island. $5.2 million. The transfer hits in 14 days. The bottle thudded solidly on the granite. A heavy silence filled the room. Then Daryl exhaled in a slow, almost theatrical release of tension. His shoulders dropped. His face shifted. When he finally turned toward me, the irritation and disappointment were gone, as if they'd never existed. "Baby," he breathed. The word felt foreign coming from him. He hadn't called me that in nearly 2 years. $5 million, he asked, voice trembling with excitement. 5.2, I said. He screamed a loud, piercing sound that echoed off the kitchen tiles and rushed toward me with his arms outstretched. He hugged me so tightly I nearly dropped the bottle. Tears leaked down his cheeks as he buried his face into my shoulder. "I knew it," he sobbed. "I told everyone you were brilliant. I believed in you every second. Oh my God, Rebecca, we made it. We actually made it." I didn't return the embrace. My arms hung awkwardly at my sides while he clung to me like a man handcuffed to a lifeboat. Last week at his sister's birthday party, he told his cousin he felt like he was babysitting a woman stuck in her 20s and was considering giving me an ultimatum. He didn't know I heard him. But now I was brilliant. He pulled back and kissed me, eager, breathless, passionate, in a way I hadn't seen in years. "We need to celebrate. Let's call my parents. And we should go see that house on Maple Street. It's perfect for us now. And Maldives, God, we have to go. Or Aspen. We deserve this. All of it." I forced a smile that didn't quite reach my eyes. "Yeah, we made it." Inside, though, something cold and heavy settled in my chest. Something I couldn't name yet, but it felt like a quiet, sinking certainty. 2 weeks later, the wire cleared. And if I thought Daryl's initial reaction was dramatic, the aftermath was astonishing. 3 days after the deposit hit, he quit his job without even mentioning it to me. He simply walked into the apartment with a proud grin and tossed his badge onto the counter. "I think it's best if I focus on managing our assets," he announced, already talking about vacations, houses, investments, joint portfolios. He began posting photos of us on Instagram again, the first ones in over a year, with captions like, "Built an empire with my best friend." Hashtag power couple. I liked the post and said nothing, but something inside me felt fragile, like thin glass stretched too far. That feeling only grew heavier. It was Tuesday night, 3:00 a.m. Daryl was asleep beside me, mumbling something about the Range Rover he wanted me to buy him next weekend. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange hollowness creeping into my stomach. Eventually, I got out of bed and paced into the living room, 3 steps to the window, 3 steps back, a nervous habit from long coding sprints. I opened Reddit, searching mindlessly for stories about relationships that change after major life milestones. Maybe someone out there understood this strange emotional disconnect I couldn't quite explain. Then I saw it. A post. 0 upvotes. Posted 6 minutes ago. Title: Trapped with a woman child who got lucky. How do I bypass a prenup? My pulse stopped. I clicked. And there, in plain text, was Daryl's voice. His descriptions. His insults. His resentment. His confession that he'd been planning to leave me until he realized my app had sold. His mention of reconnecting with Jenna, who made him feel like a man again. His frustration that the prenup I made him sign 3 years ago meant he couldn't get a dime. I read the entire thing twice. Then something inside me, not anger, not heartbreak, but something colder, fell perfectly quietly into place. I didn't scream. I didn't slam the phone down. I didn't march into the bedroom and yank the covers off Daryl, demanding an explanation. Instead, I stood in the middle of the dark living room, the city lights flickering through the blinds, and felt a strange calm settle over my skin, an unnervingly quiet awareness that something fundamental had broken and could never be repaired. I read the post again slowly, like a surgeon studying an X-ray. I, 27, am trapped with a woman child who got lucky. He described me as emotionally unstable, unambitious, prone to depression, naps, and a financial liability he had to drag through life. He talked about reconnecting with Jenna, how she was everything. Rebecca isn't successful, grounded, sophisticated. He admitted he was considering leaving me next month, but decided to stay when he heard the rumor that my app had gained investor interest. Now he wanted to know if there was a legal way to get half of the buyout despite the prenup he signed. He listed the exact sale amount, $5.2 million, down to the decimal. He mentioned the pacing I did when stressed like a weirdo wandering at 3 a.m. He mentioned details only Daryl knew. There was no doubt, no interpretation, no misunderstanding. It was him. And he wasn't just venting, he was planning. I scrolled through the comments. Some users called him a gold digger. Others told him to leave me. Some suggested manipulative tactics, start fights, create false narratives, claim emotional distress. He argued back with them, doubling down, insisting he deserved a portion because he put up with me for so long. My fingers hovered over the screen. I took a screenshot, then another, then every thread, every reply, every argument. I documented everything with meticulous care, noticing how steady my hands were. I archived the entire post using multiple backup tools. I saved copies in the cloud in my email drafts and on an encrypted drive. It wasn't rage, it was clarity. For years, Daryl made me feel like an inconvenience, someone who pulled him down, embarrassed him, slowed his life. I stayed because I thought we were building something together. Tonight it became obvious. We had been building 2 completely different things. I had been building a future. He had been building an escape plan. I finally sat on the couch, the phone warm in my hand. "Okay," I whispered to myself. "If this is who you are, then this is who I'll be." I opened my banking app. Half the liquidity, my half legally protected, went into a separate holding account Daryl couldn't touch. Then I walked quietly into the kitchen and pulled out a legal pad. I didn't have official divorce paperwork, but an intent to separate statement would hold for the night. I wrote in clean, deliberate handwriting, "Daryl, I read your post. I know about Jenna. I know you've been planning to void the prenup. The prenup is enforceable, and the assets remain mine. I am leaving tonight. Do not contact me." I left the note next to the now warm champagne bottle, the bottle that was supposed to celebrate our victory. Packing took minutes. I realized how little I wanted to bring. my laptop, my drives, my passport, some clothes. I left the jewelry he convinced me to buy, the gifts he claimed were from him, but actually charged on my credit card, the framed photos that now felt staged. I slipped my engagement ring, thin, simple, chosen more for budget than meaning, onto the nightstand beside him. He was asleep, snoring, lightly oblivious to the fact that his world had already shifted under him. When I stepped out of the bedroom, I didn't look back. By 3:40 a.m., I was in the hallway calling an Uber Black. The air felt different, lighter, sharper, almost electric. I leaned against the wall and opened Reddit again, staring at the post that had detonated my life. A wicked quiet thought crossed my mind. I clicked reply. My fingers typed with terrifying calm. You don't. The prenup you didn't read protects the loser. Divorce papers on the kitchen counter. Then I pressed post. The message felt like a door closing, a heavy final latch sliding shut. When the Uber arrived, I stepped inside, sinking into the leather seat. I didn't watch the building fade in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to. That chapter was already gone. During the ride, my phone vibrated violently once, twice, then continuously. Notifications flooded the screen. Reddit notification, throwaway WF27 has deleted their post, deleted their comments, deleted their account. He had woken up. He had read my reply. He knew. Then came the calls. Daryl, 3 missed calls. Daryl again. Daryl's mom. Unknown numbers I didn't recognize. I put the phone on Do Not Disturb, reclined the seat, and watched the dark city sweep past the window. For the first time in years, my chest felt light. By the time the Uber pulled up to the St. Regis downtown, I felt a sense of control that I hadn't felt since before Daryl and I ever moved in together. I checked in using the overnight concierge, then went up to my suite and stood by the window, watching dawn hint along the horizon. I should have felt devastated. I should have been shaking. I should have been grieving the man I thought Daryl was. Instead, I felt steady. Sunrise was a quiet ribbon of orange on the skyline when I finally got into bed. I closed my eyes and let myself rest, knowing the real chaos hadn't even started yet. I woke to a different kind of storm. At 11:00 a.m., while enjoying overpriced hotel coffee in a plush robe, I spoke with my lawyer over video call. By 11:20, we had drafted the initial separation petition and outlined steps for additional protection in case Daryl tried anything rash. At 11:30, the hotel lobby erupted with noise. I recognized the voice instantly. He had tracked my location using our shared phone plan. Daryl stood in the middle of the lobby, hair disheveled, eyes wild, wearing sweatpants that looked like he'd grabbed them off the floor. He spotted me in the restaurant and practically sprinted toward my table, ignoring the stares. Rebecca, he hissed, voice sharp with panic. We need to talk, now. Heads turned, executives, travelers, a couple sharing brunch. I didn't stand. I didn't invite him to sit. I simply lifted my coffee cup and looked at him over the rim. Yes, Daryl, you can't just leave, he snapped, slamming his hands onto the table. You can't just disappear to a hotel and drop a bomb like that in a family group chat. My mom is having chest pains. Do you understand what you've done? I think I was very clear, I said calmly. I returned you. His expression collapsed. Shock, anger, shame, disbelief, all fighting for dominance. And I suddenly realized something remarkable. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. Daryl stood there, chest heaving, eyes darting around the hotel restaurant as if looking for an escape route or an audience, maybe both. People were staring, but for once I didn't feel embarrassed. I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like his chaotic energy was something I needed to manage or soften or excuse. I just felt finished. He slid into the booth across from me without being invited, his knee bouncing uncontrollably. You're acting insane, he whispered harshly. Why would you humiliate me like that? Why would you send those screenshots to our families? I set my coffee cup down with deliberate calm. I sent the truth, I said. If you felt humiliated, that's a byproduct of your actions, not mine. He stared at me, stunned, as if the idea that I could hold him accountable was somehow unthinkable. That post wasn't real, he said quickly. I made it up. People do that online all the time for attention. I was just venting. I was stressed. You've been distant lately, and I exaggerated. It was fiction. Is that the story you're going with? I asked. Creative writing. Despite the exact dollar amount, the exact timeline, the pacing at 3 a.m. The details only you knew. His mouth opened, closed, then opened again. Rebecca, come on. You know I'd never betray you like that. You're blowing a stupid internet post out of proportion. I slid my phone across the table, the screen already open to a screenshot. The comments section. The part where he argued with people calling him a gold digger, He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. That wasn't me, he said weakly. Daryl, I said, lowering my voice. The post is saved. In 3 archives. Every reply, every edit, every timestamp. Even if you deleted your account, nothing is gone. Stop lying. His jaw tightened. Fine, he snapped. Maybe I wrote it, but I was angry. You were pulling away. I didn't actually mean any of it. You meant enough of it to plan an exit strategy, I replied. His expression flickered guilt, then irritation, then something uglier, desperation. You're really leaving me over this. After everything I've done for you, I supported you for years. I paid the rent. I put up with your mood swings and your weird work schedule. And now that you're rich, you think you can just throw me away. The irony almost made me laugh. You didn't support me, I said. You tolerated me. There's a difference. And you weren't paying the rent for my dream. You were paying it because you didn't want to live with your parents. That's not fair, he said, voice cracking. I stayed with you when you had nothing. Doesn't that count? You stayed, I said, because you thought I would stay nothing. Because you thought you were the superior one, the stable one, the one I'd always rely on. The moment I became useful to you, you changed the script. He leaned forward, lowering his voice. We can fix this, Rebecca. We can go to therapy. We can work through the communication issues. You're just overwhelmed. No, I said simply, I'm awake. He stared at me confused. What the hell does that mean? It means for the first time in years, I see you clearly. My lawyer's words from earlier echoed in my mind that the prenup I had insisted on the one. Daryl barely skimmed because he didn't think I'd ever be successful was one of the tightest he'd seen, ironclad, unbreakable, protecting every cent I had created, protecting me from someone exactly like Daryl. And Daryl knew it. It was all over his face, the growing realization that he had gambled his future on the assumption that I'd stay small. He miscalculated. He clenched his jaw and shifted tactics. You're ruining your own reputation, he hissed. People will think you're unstable. My parents are already panicking. You blindsided them. You blindsided me. I raised an eyebrow. You blindsided yourself when you wrote a detailed manifesto about using me for money and running back to Jenna. He froze. There it was, the crack in the facade, the guilt, the fear. Nothing happened with Jenna, he said quickly. You said in your post that she makes you feel like a man, that she has everything I don't. That was exaggeration, he insisted. You're twisting everything. I held his gaze. Then look me in the eye and tell me you weren't planning to leave me. His eyes flicked away. That was answer enough. Before he could recover, a security guard approached the table, the one who had been eyeing him from the moment he stormed in. Sir, is everything all right here? He asked. Daryl's face flushed with humiliation. I'm fine, he snapped. This is my girlfriend. Ex-girlfriend, I corrected. The guard nodded once. Sir, she checked in as a solo guest. If she'd like you to leave, you'll need to step away. For a moment, I wondered if Daryl would explode, if he'd make a scene or try to guilt me again. But something in his expression broke. His shoulders slumped. He looked at me as if seeing a stranger. You can't do this, he whispered. You can't leave me like this. You know I don't. I don't have anyone else. For the first time, I saw the truth beneath all his arrogance, fear of being alone, fear of losing access, fear of losing control. But it wasn't my job to save him. You already did this, I said quietly. I'm just following your example. He stared at me for several seconds, searching for a foothold in my expression. When he didn't find it, something inside him snapped. He stood abruptly, knocking the edge of the table with his hip, and stormed out of the restaurant as the security guard followed behind him. Silence settled over the table. The waiter slid me a fresh napkin as if I'd spilled something not ended a 3-year relationship. I picked up my coffee again, took a sip, and breathed for what felt like the first time all morning. 2 weeks passed before I saw him again. In that time, the separation paperwork moved quickly. My lawyer handled 90% of it, and the prenup did the rest. Daryl wasn't entitled to a cent. He could file complaints, appeals, claims of emotional distress. It wouldn't matter. Everything we owned that wasn't jointly purchased went to its rightful owner. And the only major purchase we'd made together was a couch. During those 2 weeks, Daryl tried every angle, every method of manipulation. He emailed, he texted, he called from unknown numbers. When he realized I was blocking everything he went for, the one thing he knew, I loved my parents. They told me about the voicemail he left crying dramatically, insisting he'd been misunderstood, begging them to intervene, painting himself as a victim of my irrational spiral. They did not call him back. Instead, they invited me to dinner. We sat at a dark wood table at an old steakhouse downtown. My father ordering the same drink. He always ordered my mother, telling a story about her garden, as if my relationship wasn't dissolving in slow motion behind us. It felt grounding, normal, even comforting. Then I saw my mother's expression shift. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking over my shoulder. "Oh, for heaven's sake," my father muttered. I didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Daryl. And he looked worse than he had at the hotel. I felt Daryl's presence before I saw him, an anxious, jittery energy that prickled across the back of my neck. When I finally turned, he was standing a few feet from our table, breathing hard like he had run the whole way there. He'd dressed up, or at least tried to. He wore the navy button-down he used to save for family dinners with my parents, but it was wrinkled and slightly untucked. His hair, normally styled with precision, looked like he'd raked his hands through it a dozen times on the drive over. "Rebecca," he said, voice trembling, "please, we need to talk." My parents went silent. My father set down his fork. My mother folded her hands in her lap, with the calm, practiced smile of a woman preparing for confrontation. I didn't stand. I didn't invite him to sit. "Daryl," I said evenly, "you're interrupting dinner." He took a shaky breath, eyes flicking between my parents and me. "I don't care. I can't just let this happen. You're throwing away everything we built. You're acting irrational, and I need your parents to understand that." "My parents don't need to understand anything except the truth," I said. He swallowed. "Exactly. The truth is you're making decisions based on one stupid, exaggerated post. I told you I made it up. It wasn't real. It was just—" My father cut him off. "Son," I read every word. His voice was low, controlled, unforgiving. That wasn't creative writing. That was contempt in long paragraphs. Daryl's jaw worked side to side as he tried to regroup. "Sir, please." My mother leaned forward, her voice soft, but edged with a sharpness I'd only heard a handful of times in my life. "Daryl." I saw the comments, too. You weren't venting. You were planning your exit. You were asking strangers how to take advantage of our daughter's success. His eyes widened, wounded. "Mrs. Fisher. I love Rebecca. I always have. I stood by her through everything. You think any of that meant nothing to me?" My mother didn't blink. "Yes," she said simply. "That's exactly what it meant." A quiet, stunned silence settled over the table. For a moment, Daryl looked genuinely lost, as if expecting someone to rescue him from a narrative he no longer controlled. But when he turned back to me, something hardened in his expression. He tried a new tactic. "Where's your compassion, Rebecca?" he asked, voice cracking. "Where's your loyalty? You're acting like I'm some kind of monster when I sacrificed so much. I stayed with you when you had nothing. I supported you when everyone else laughed at your dream. Doesn't that count for anything?" I let out a slow breath. "You stayed because it made you feel superior," I said. "Because you liked being the one with the stable job, the steady income, the adult life. You stayed because you didn't think my dream would ever be real enough to threaten your control." His face twisted. "That's not true." "It is," I said quietly. "And the moment I proved I could stand on my own, you panicked." He shook his head rapidly. "You don't understand. Jenna." My father's eyebrows shot up. "Ah," he said. "Now we're getting somewhere." Daryl froze. I stared at him. "What about Jenna?" His mouth opened, but only a strangled sound came out. His eyes darted around the restaurant, searching for an escape. Finally, he muttered, She wasn't, nothing happened." I tilted my head. "So she didn't want you." His face collapsed. And that was the truth. Not the polished version he told himself. Not the confident fantasy he wrote in that post where he imagined himself desirable and sought after. The real story was simpler. He had been preparing to jump to someone he thought was better, and she didn't reach out her hand. "You tried to swing to the next branch," I said softly, "but you missed." A muscle in his jaw twitched. And now I continued, "You're falling, and you want me to be the net." All the air left his lungs at once. My father leaned back in his chair. "Rebecca," he said calmly, "do you want me to call the manager?" "I've got it." I stood for the first time since he arrived. The entire restaurant seemed to shift its attention, though no one was openly staring. My parents watched me with quiet pride. Daryl watched me like I was slipping through his fingers. "I'm not a safety net, Daryl," I said, my voice steady. "I'm the ground, and you just hit it." His lips trembled. "Rebecca, please, please don't do this. I messed up, yes, but we've been together for years. You can't just erase that." "I'm not erasing it," I said. "I'm remembering it clearly for the first time." A manager had approached by now, alerted by the tension. He waited a respectful distance away. Daryl's voice grew frantic. "I can change. We can go to therapy. You can keep everything, every cent. I don't want your money. I just want you. Please, Rebecca. Please don't walk away." If he had said any of those things 6 months ago, maybe even 3 months ago, I might have cracked. But I wasn't the same woman he thought I was. And his pleas weren't born from love. They were born from fear. Daryl, I said you spent years convincing me I was a burden. Now you're terrified to lose me because you finally realized I never needed you at all. Something shattered in his expression, something brittle, fragile, tied to pride more than affection. The manager stepped forward. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave, he said politely. You're disturbing guests. Daryl stared at me one last time, eyes wet and furious. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, he said. You think you're better than me because you have money now? You're not. You're still the same insecure, anxious woman you were before. I nodded slowly. Maybe. But now I'm an insecure, anxious woman with boundaries. He flinched as if I'd slapped him. 2 security staff escorted him away. He didn't fight. He didn't scream. He just sagged between them and allowed himself to be guided out the front door. When I sat back down, my mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of you, she said. My father raised his glass. To new beginnings, he said. I took a sip of water instead of wine because I wanted to feel every second of this moment with absolute clarity. Daryl was gone, and I didn't feel empty. I felt free. Of course, endings aren't really endings. They just make room for consequences. 18 months later, those consequences would come back to find me in the most unexpected way. And he would no longer be the man who once tried to stand in my light. 18 months passed. Enough time for a whole life to rebuild itself almost quietly, like something growing under the soil unseen until it suddenly bursts into bloom. In that time, I learned how to sleep again. Real sleep, not the shallow, twitchy kind that comes from worrying whether your partner resents you. I learned how to breathe without feeling small. I traveled. I invested in other founders who reminded me of myself, people with ideas that were bigger than their bank accounts. I launched a small venture studio. I built something new on my own terms without apology. And somewhere in the middle of all that, I met someone. His name was Michael Adler, an architect with a sharp mind, gentle humor, and no interest in the startup world. Or in my money. During our 5th date, when I finally told him what my company sold for, he stared at me for a long second, then shrugged and asked if I wanted the last bite of dessert. It was the most refreshing moment I'd had in years. By the time we reached the Mandarin Oriental for a fintech summit in New York, Michael and I had been together for 6 months. Not rushed, not frantic, not built on dependency or insecurity, just steady, healthy, warm. The summit lounge buzzed with the low hum of investors, founders, and executives drifting between tables. I was reviewing notes on my tablet, sipping tea, waiting for Michael to finish a call with a client. The afternoon light filtered through the massive windows, reflecting off the skyline and casting golden angles across the room. When a shadow fell over my table, I assumed it was Michael returning. It wasn't. Rebecca. The voice was small, hesitant, almost unfamiliar in its softness. I looked up slowly as if my mind needed confirmation before my eyes could accept what they were seeing. Daryl. Not the Daryl I remembered. Not the sharply dressed man who used to rehearse confidence in the mirror. Not the one who criticized every dream I ever pursued. This Daryl looked smaller, worn. The sharp edges that once defined him had dulled into something tired and unfocused. His hair was shorter, unstyled. His uniform, black slacks, white shirt, was unmistakably hotel event staff attire. He held a tray of empty glasses, but his hands trembled slightly. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Hello, Daryl. I said, my voice calm, neutral. Not cold, just distant, the way you feel towards someone you once sat next to in high school but never truly knew. He swallowed hard. I saw your name on the guest list, he murmured. I wasn't sure if it was really you until I saw you sitting here. How have you been? I asked politely. It wasn't small talk, it was closure. He shifted from foot to foot. I'm getting by. Things got complicated after the separation. The legal stuff and, job stuff. His eyes flicked downward in embarrassment. I'm staying with my sister in Queens for now, just until things stabilize. Okay, I said gently. I hope things get easier. He blinked quickly like he wasn't sure what to do with my kindness. Or maybe he wasn't sure if it was kindness at all. I heard about your firm, he said. Fisher Labs, the Forbes article. He attempted a small smile. You're doing really well. I am. A beat of silence passed between us long enough that I saw it in his eyes, the question he didn't want to ask but needed to. Do you? His voice cracked. He cleared it. Do you ever think about us? I studied him carefully, not cruelly, Not triumphantly, just honestly. Did I think about us? I thought about the version of myself I used to be with him. The one who apologized constantly, who shrank herself, who waited for validation that never came. I thought about the nights pacing in the dark, praying that success would fix what was broken. I thought about the moment I realized that love should not feel like debt. But him, the real him, the one standing in front of me. No, I didn't think about him at all. No, Daryl, I said softly, I don't. The answer hit him harder than anything I had said during the breakup. His shoulders slumped, his gaze falling somewhere near my shoes, as if the weight of all his choices finally settled in his chest at once. He swallowed again. I'm glad you're doing well, he whispered. I really am. I believed him. Maybe for the first time he meant it without expecting anything in return. Just then, Michael walked into the lounge. His green tie was slightly askew, his hair windswept from rushing across Midtown. His face lit up when he spotted me, and in the next second he was leaning down to kiss the top of my head. Sorry I took so long, he said. Are you ready to go? I smiled. Yes. He noticed Daryl standing awkwardly beside the table and nodded politely. Daryl nodded back, but his eyes lingered on the subtle ways Michael and I fit together, effortless, easy, mutual. I stood picking up my bag. Daryl stepped aside automatically, giving me space. Goodbye, Daryl, I said. He looked up. There was no anger left, no entitlement, just a quiet ache, the kind that comes when someone realizes the final door has closed and there is no version of the world where it reopens. Goodbye, Rebecca, he said. And that was it. No drama, no accusations, no lingering threats. Just a ghost watching me walk out of a house I no longer lived in. Michael took my hand and we stepped into the hallway where the city stretched endlessly outside the panoramic windows. The future felt wide and bright open in a way it had never been before. As we waited for the elevator, Michael gave my hand a gentle squeeze. You okay? He asked. I exhaled, feeling something deep inside me settle. Yeah, I said. I'm more than okay. The elevator dinged, the doors opened, and I walked forward without looking back. For the first time in my life, the past wasn't following me, and the only thing I could see ahead was possibility.